in the Indian subcontinent, there is an issue which my lovely experts today have picked up. They found that there's early, severe, and often fatal heart attacks that people from the Indian subcontinent encounter across the globe. So they created this film called The Brown Heart. It's a docudrama, but what it does is it has a lot of stories of people, what they've been through. It has 40 leading experts who will give you their opinions, their solutions, and they've also got suggestions and practical tips. So it's a one-stop shop for a lot of us Indians and for people from the Indian subcontinent who are looking for solutions for what is almost considered an epidemic. I have with here a stellar team today. I have Dr. Renu Joshi. She's an endocrinologist and a diabetologist, and she has over 30 years experience in the field. She's also received several awards and she's on a number of boards. I also have Dr. Nirmal Joshi, who serves as the president of the Joshi Health Foundation. He's been in clinical practice of medicine in the US for over 35 years. He too sits on a number of boards. He has won many leadership awards, teaching awards, and what I thought was very interesting, he has this creative bent where he loves telling stories. He loves telling human stories. And when his beautiful wife, Dr. Renu Joshi, went through heart issues, he has taken that as a way, and they have reached out and used that as a way of educating everyone and of educating us all on how to, well, we'll talk about it, but on issues of the heart, so to say. This also means a lot to me, this podcast, because I lost my father when I was 14 and my father was 44. He passed away with a heart attack, and this is something which has shaped our lives forever because of what happened. So welcome to the chat, Drs. Joshi. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Anshu, for having both of us.
My first question to you is, when you were making this, and you have some incredible voices in there, not, you have experts, you have people from, normal world, you have celebrities from Bollywood. What were some of the things that you picked up? Was there a wake-up call that you had when you were making the film? And what is your takeaway from that?
So I think I may start this, Anshu, because I think some of your listeners may have seen the movie, and some of them may have not. So my heart story started very early in my 50s, and this was a wake-up call to me because I have always led a very healthy life like yours, with diet, exercise, everything in the best possible way. So when I had chest pain and I was diagnosed with heart disease, we started doing research as to why me. And the wake up call for me was that the research of this heart disease in South Asians has been happening for decades. And as a doctor, I did not know about it. And I also realized that how preventable this was, especially when it comes to cholesterol. And if as a doctor, I don't know about it, how is a layman supposed to know about it? So I think that is why that was one of the main thing we started, that if I can have it, anybody else can have it. So why not educate people by making something which is common for layman people?
And I think I'll add to that a little bit that, as Renu was talking, I'd like, one of your, thoughts around the question was, well, what struck us as we were kind of going through this process, right? So Renu talked about the fact that there is hard research showing the severity and the early onset of heart disease among the Indian diaspora everywhere, including in India. But to me, what was most telling was the fact as to how preventable it is. We somehow have this tendency to say, hey, it's in our genes, we can't do anything. It's this defeatist sort of a tendency. And to me, the biggest take home was, wow, 80 to 90% of this can be prevented by actions that we can do as lay people, as regular people. And the second part of it was we then said, well, now that we know that, we really need to tell people not just that, but how do we do it?
Okay, so if you're saying that 80 to 90% is preventable, can we talk about some of the things which are preventable? Um, because there are so many habits that we are just born with and we grow up with and we accept them sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, now with Google, there is a lot more questioning happening, but it's just, you just said, but that's how it's always been. So tell me some of the things which you say are preventable.
Yeah, and when you really get down to it, uh, it's interesting that the the habits or lifestyle or what have you, all of the paths repeatedly led us to what I would call simplicity, simple solutions, right? So there was not like, oh my God, you have to do something out of the ordinary. They gravitated down to, in my opinion, the two big ones, if I were to just sum it up: diet and exercise. The whole world talks about diet and exercise, right? But we get down to in the film, we repetitively draw attention to the simple things. So, for example, in the context of exercise,
Hmm.
we've known for decades that exercise helps. We were able to kind of more significantly focus on why exercise is important. And one thing we found very quickly was, which we should have known, that Indians across the globe, both in India and elsewhere, just don't exercise. Now that's changing, particularly in metropolitan places. Other folks, who are well educated on the issue, that's beginning to change, including people like yourself who are putting out podcasts, who are
Hmm.
repetitively screaming from rooftops saying, "Hey, do these simple things." But the layperson still doesn't know that. So there's a very interesting study and what we try to do is every single time we back up what we're saying by evidence, because everyone and their brother talks about something that's their opinion but doesn't back it with evidence. So one of the evidence from
Yes.
Lancet Global, which is a leading publication across the world, is that even as late as 2022 this publication came out, and Times of India and other publications kind of caught this, that over 50% of Indians simply don't exercise,
Hmm.
literally at all, right?
No, and also when you talk about
Yeah.
exercise, what that means is, oh, I do yoga
Hmm.
and I walk. So yoga is great, and has I have no qualms. Yoga is wonderful for strengthening, for muscle building, for flexibility, so you don't fall and break. Unless you increase your heart rate
Yes.
to an 80% or 60% of maximum predicted heart rate, which neither happens with yoga nor does it happen with walk. A
Now,
simple.
interestingly, Renu, what I had also seen was that yoga is phenomenal. So we
Hmm.
never want to put that down. We want to make sure that we caveat all that we're saying with the
Hmm.
fact that yoga is wonderful. Please keep doing it, do more of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's cool. It has independent health benefits, it has cardiovascular benefits of its own. But don't replace that or replace exercise with yoga,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
exercise has aerobic exercise has independent benefit. Another kind of subtext to this title is that women, and we repeatedly draw attention to women specifically because there are gender specific things that are unique and distinct one from the other. So one thing we found was that while exercise rates, about 57% in this particular Lancet study of women were found not to exercise, 42% of men were found. So women, disproportionately higher numbers, don't exercise. So that was one. So that's exercise. And the other big one was diet, 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 and
Yes.
diet,
Yes.
right?
Now, that's also what I want to ask you about because we're from the land of Ayurveda, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Our food is meant to be healing. So, where did we go wrong? What happened? Because even in your film, you talk about it. What happened to our food? It's meant to be life saving, it's the life
Yes.
force. What
And
happened?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anshu, you are actually 100% correct. Because if you look at our natural way of living, if you go back to the ancient times, how did our people live? They ate fruits, they ate vegetables, they ate whole grains, and they did not fry.
Hmm.
They lived on what we called as sattvic food, right? So
Yes, yes.
simplicity and simple food. And we were very close to the natural source of food. Now, as you go away from the natural source of food, the farther you go, the more processed it becomes. So that has replaced into fried food,
Hmm.
processed food, and fried snacks. So while our food is so good, we have made huge changes in our diet, which has made our food 10 times more complicated. So that's why the effect of the natural sattvic food is gone away. I mean, our masalas, our the turmeric, the dhania, you look at it, and most of the herbs, they are actually very helpful. If we know that they are anti-inflammatory, which means that they decrease the
Mm-hmm.
inflammation. And now, for the last 5 years, there is actually a lot of data coming out that heart is inflammatory disease, which is a
Interesting.
completely new concept.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
interestingly,
See, yeah.
we met with Dr. Ambuj Roy at the All India Institute of
Mm.
Medical Sciences in Delhi, and it was fascinating. Ambuj Talks has done a lot of research, and what they've done is they've come up with the concept. The concept is not new, but the way they have researched it over the last 5 to 10 years, and they've now come out with a publication about it. What they call the Indian adaptation of the Mediterranean diet, and essentially
Right.
at the root of all of that is that add anti-inflammatory foods in your diet and remove inflammatory foods. He was talking about our masalas, like
Mm.
Renu said, have strong anti-inflammatory properties. And he so they've actually put out an entire list of foods. And if you look at it back to what you just asked, it goes back to our good old
Mm-hmm.
times when we boiled things,
Mm.
we put them directly on the fire, we did not deep fry things and so on. All of those, if we go back to the simplicity, it gets us the right answers. With one caveat, I think, and that's very important for our Indian community, because what the Indian community does is that it takes this basic concept, and I think when they are talking about it in YouTube forums and other social media forums, they what they don't mention is they take it perhaps 2 steps too far, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean not everything that's natural is necessarily healthy, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
for example, you can have completely unprocessed things like ghee in
Mm.
excess amounts has boatloads of saturated fat. There are certain nuts that are loaded with cholesterol. So there is no such thing as good
Mm.
or bad. There is nothing binary. If you excess on nuts, which normally are considered good, but in the Indian context, people broadly say things like, nuts are good for you, so I can have nuts.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
wait a minute, you can have about 12 nuts
Yeah.
in a
You
day.
can have
And
basically a
Handful.
handful, not more. Yeah.
I know I'm preaching to the choir. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think these are small things if people make small changes.
Yes.
And one of the things which I do want to point out in Dr. Ambuj's study is that the white
Mm-hmm.
rice and the simple sugars. I think like the sodas, the drinks, the juices, everywhere it says juices are good for you, but juices are boatload of sugar. So if you can have an orange instead of apple instead of juices, I think that's a lot better. Again, going back to natural.
Right, right. And I also think we sometimes take something, I mean, like you were talking about anti-inflammatory foods, like say turmeric, but even turmeric can be very heaty. So watch how much you're consuming,
Yes.
what works for your body.
Yeah.
A lot of food is personalized.
Yeah.
If you just are drinking turmeric all day, of course it's going to harm you,
Yeah.
So
Yes.
people need to be also careful about
Exactly.
things like that. The thing I want to also ask you about is stress, because I found, especially I've lived in India and I've lived, outside India. And what I found is when Indians go abroad, there's this big pressure to succeed. Um, or even in India, that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as a race. Maybe I'm wrong, but how does that play a role in heart disease amongst people?
Yeah, absolutely, that's a great question. And I think that we delve a lot into that in our film. That's one of the pillars
Mm-hmm.
of what we talk about. And it's quite fascinating as times have gone on, both in India and elsewhere. It's actually very, very similar. In fact, it should not come as any surprise that with upward mobility of society in general, and in India, that is particularly the case. We have done remarkably well for ourselves. And what a wonderful thing, right? We've done so well for ourselves back home as well. So when we go now, you see a lot of affluence, you see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
young people doing really well for themselves. And it's really heartwarming to see that our own people, our next generation, do as well as they do. But with that comes with everything that comes with urbanization
Mm-hmm.
and with competing for small resources, right? So
Mm-hmm.
competing for reaching the top, competing for doing really well in life, right? And so on. So that has brought a phenomenal amount of stress. And one person who's done a great job with not only articulating that, but also researching it is Dr. Mohit Gupta from Delhi.
Okay.
And he's done wonderful work on stress and heart disease, and among other things. He's a big Brahma Kumari fan. He's a lot into meditation and stress relief. So what Mohit did was he looked at about close to 1,000, about 900 people who had acute heart attacks who were admitted to the hospital, right? And
Yeah.
he asked the question of all of them, what is your level of stress in the past 12 months, right? And lo and behold, shouldn't come as a surprise, but
Mm.
it actually did come as somewhat of a surprise as to the number. So when what they were asked the question, moderate stress or severe stress, and they defined what they meant by that. Upwards of 90% of people who had acute heart attack said they were either moderately or severely stressed prior to the heart
To
attack
the heart.
for the 12-month period. So that was one. And then, so he was very struck by that. And then he was also struck by the fact how young people, he was operating, he's a cardiologist, he's an interventional cardiologist. He was operating on people who were in their 30s, early 40s. One person he described to me was 26 years old that he had done, an angioplasty on, and he said, you know what? Based on the number of young people who are developing this, what I began to do was I knew stress was an issue. And now I began to ask the question, is there something going on in their
Mm-hmm.
body, meaning physical state, that stress, which is inherently a mental kind of a starting point at
Mm-hmm.
least. And what he found was when he's done some very elegant research on telomeres, which is a
Mm-hmm.
genetic component of the DNA that is actually protective in and of its own for cardiac disease. And what he did was he found that one part of the DNA called the telomere actually shortens in people
Mm-hmm.
who are stressed in
Yep.
the young. So for young people, he found their biologic age, people who are in their 30s, their biologic age was in their 60s and 70s. So it's very
Wow.
telling. So as you can
And I
tell,
think that telomere data has
yeah.
now been proven in some other studies which I was looking at.
Yeah. So
Right.
granted that it's very preliminary data, Anshu, so we can't hang our hat on it quite yet, but it's a very, very provocative way to look at this to say, you know what, stress is not just in the mind. And that Renu and I have taught for years now,
Mm.
that stress causes irreversible
Yeah.
changes in your body.
Yeah.
Renu
Yeah.
is a
And
bright
as an
example.
endocrinologist,
Yeah.
I mean, stress causes increase in your cortisol. Everybody knows cortisol is not good for you. Stress increases your
Yeah.
adrenaline, and what adrenaline does is narrows your vessels because it causes constriction. So there is clear data with stress that things can change, and if they continue to happen, I mean, why stressed people have more high blood
Mhm.
pressure? Because their vessels are more constricted over time.
Yes.
So I think
Yes.
there's just really good data. Diabetes, exactly the same data. The sugar goes high, the blood pressure goes high, and you don't sleep. That's the other big problem. And they have direct link to heart disease now, and that data is medically proven, so we know all that.
So, from what I understand, I mean, stress causes the cellular memory to, and it affects cellular memory, and then it affects everything in the body.
Yeah.
And what I love is also that you give solutions to stress because people who live in cities can't help the stress. So please talk about the solutions a couple of solutions you've talked about in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we strongly talk about is, and Renu and I have, I mean, it's quite fascinating. These are some of the things that both of us have known quite well, but in the course of the film, it was so dramatically in front of us, right? And so stark in front of our eyes with losing people from the community who are highly stressed, high strung, and so on. Renu and I actually we used to do it, but not as religiously as we now do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is very specific meditative techniques every morning. I never did this in my life. I wish I had done this. 20 years ago, I was at the top of the food chain with
Mhm,
running institutions, running 600 bed hospitals, and so on. And I would get what I call 3 a.m. moments where I'd get up with thinking 20 different
mhm,
things that,
mhm,
this needs to be done. There is a budget of $10 million here. There is something else going on here, all of that. And I wish I had known. So what we had done, back to your question, one of the biggest solutions we talk about is meditative practices. And meditative practices, what we learned over time, both of us, and we now regularly do it
mhm.
religiously. I can skip my exercise, but I don't skip my meditative session in the
Same here.
morning.
Same
Yeah,
here.
Same here.
exactly.
Yeah.
Same
So
here.
Mhm.
so we can raise our hands and
Yeah.
say and cry from the rooftop saying, and what I learned was there is no right and wrong
Mhm,
in it. There is no good or bad in it. You just sit down quietly with yourself in a reflective mode for 10 minutes. You can do your favorite type of meditation, whether it be breathing techniques,
mhm,
whether it be reflection, whether it be simply observing yourself sitting quietly, any of those, or it be mindfulness, looking around you, sipping your tea, enjoying the tea, and just being able to savor the taste of the tea or the coffee that you're drinking. What I found was there's no good or bad.
mhm,
Just the 10 minutes of what I call grounding
mhm.
is so major, Anshu. I can't even tell you how that during the course of the day. Renu, you
So
can
two
talk
things
about.
I think I can add to it. So two things, and we talk about it for a glowing example of one of our patient who was diagnosed with heart disease at age 48. And then he decided to just take a different naturopathy course with meditation, with exercise, with yoga, everything together, and a healthy sattvic diet. He's now 82 years old. And he did not have to have any stent done.
Right.
Yes. Does he have heart disease? Yes. Does he
Mhm,
have some blockage? Yes. Does he take cholesterol medicine? Yes. But he has maintained himself. And one of the things he taught me was do guided imagery. So what that means is that when I'm doing my meditation, I actually say to myself, my heart is not clogged. My vessels are clean. My vessels are clean. My vessels are clean. I'm hiking. I'm doing everything. I'm not stopping. And that really does help me positively, which is called positive affirmation
mhm.
meditation. And I think that has really helped me. I mean, if people will not believe, I did 33 miles on Yosemite last week.
Oh,
And we went
amazing.
to 8,000 feet of heights, which at one point all the kids were saying, Mom, I don't know you can do it. I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to do it. And yes, I had issues. I had to stop, but I was able to do it. And
Mhm.
that gave me such positive vibe that I
Yes.
can do anything in my life despite having heart disease. And the
Amazing.
other thing, yeah, so that was one thing I was talking. The second thing is gratitude,
Mm.
is the meaningful life. I think we are all at the stages of our life that we have made enough money, we have done everything for ourselves and even for our kids. I think they're settling down. And I think in meditation, they talk to you about how much gratitude means and how much a meaningful life means. What that means is doing for somebody else, like
Mhm.
you're doing. Like we created this document.
Purpose. Yes.
Yeah, we had no intention of making money. This is all nonprofit. The only one goal is to save lives. That's it.
And I think on that note, one of our regrets, again among many, but we don't look at it like regrets. We look at it like, yeah, we've now understood this. But if you are, whether you're 35 years old or you're 40 years old, at whatever age, the earlier you can start with this, the better off you are. You don't, there is nothing wrong in starting in the 60s and 70s or even your 80s. But if you start in the 30s or 40s, much like investing, right?
Mhm,
You get the
mhm.
return on
You
that
get better
investment.
at it.
You
Yeah.
get the results.
And I
And
think,
I absolutely agree with what you're saying about gratitude. Kind of, I mean, it completely changed my life, and it's such an important part of my life. But there's one thing that you just said, Nirmal, which I just want you to talk about a little bit, which is when you said the year earlier you start. So you were talking about gratitude, but I also think when a lot of kids, I would say kids because I'm in my 50s, when a lot of people are in their 20s and 30s from the Indian subcontinent, they seem to forget that there is this issue that can come up, the heart issue. Because at that point, you've got the world at your feet. And even just talking to people about us having this chat today, and I would say, and someone in their 20s and 30s would just skip over it. They were like, oh, we'll deal with it later. But it is something which has affected generations. And I don't think there's ever too early to start doing something about it, right?
Absolutely. I think that that was one of my biggest learnings. Like I said at the beginning of the talk, is not just that it's preventable, but there is, the earlier you start that preventive effort, the better. Now, that being said, I think the hardest thing, and I don't mean this in a bitter way or in a defeatist way, because being a public health professional most of my life, I believe that you need to keep chipping away at it. I'm not going to change a 25-year-old overnight. If
Mhm,
it was that simple, everyone who smokes would have stopped smoking. Everyone who
mhm,
consumes large amounts of alcohol would have stopped consuming that alcohol. So our goal should be, as people who, as we begin to learn more, is to keep trying. And the way I look at it is, for people like us, the thought process should be, in public health, 1% success is considered very, very good. So if you talk,
mhm.
which is why what you are doing today is getting this word out to, let's say, a denominator of 50, 100, 200, 1,000, 4,000 people. Our thought is, if one of them can change, our job is done.
Right,
So
right.
you never lose that enthusiasm,
Yes.
degree of passion to say,
Mhm,
listen, guys, and you should be willing to hear a contrarian point of view. We hear that, those of us
mhm,
who've raised children, we know exactly
mhm.
what that looks like,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, so,
absolutely.
and sometimes a sort of a very visceral response to that. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to start a statin when I'm 35.
Mm,
But the short answer is, in a collective way, in a quiet way, but in a firm way. And the way I look at it is repetitively talking to people in their own language, number
mhm,
one. Second, which we will come back to later in the talk, is small. You
mhm.
don't need to boil the ocean. You don't need to begin running marathons tomorrow. Small changes. If I can
So
request you, so what I tell my,
I
yeah,
want you to talk
yeah,
about that more.
Yeah.
We
Small
can talk
changes.
about it now,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
that's one thing which you said. I think you said in the film something about it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
yeah,
Do all or something. Do something small.
Yes.
Talk to me, because
yeah,
I thought that was so
yeah.
important, especially for people who, you know, doing 10 things is scary. But one
Yes.
little change. Tell us about what you meant.
Yeah, I'll
So
let
I think,
Renu do
yes.
that, and then I'll share a beautiful story around
So,
it too.
so I think when we started the support group, this
Yeah.
story really will resonate with our audience today very well. So we'd started a support group after giving the same lecture on weight loss, and not on the weight loss, but how to keep the New Year resolution. That was the topic, and we had 12 group of people who came together. He said, "We are interested in weight loss. Let's make a support group and let's do things." And I think so. One of the story which one person shared, and then we actually talk about all those in the interview in the documentary as to how they came along and what they did. And
Hmm.
one of the ladies said was, Renu, bhujia was my weakness. And
Right,
when you said we have to do a small thing, all I thought was, I'm going to just stop bhujia, nothing else.
right, right,
And she put her bhujia all in the basement here, so
right.
she didn't have it available in the pantry or kitchen, so she couldn't eat it. And she lost 15 pounds just by stopping bhujia.
Wow,
Very, very small, very,
wow.
very small thing.
And these
So
are absolutely
these are
powerful
true
stories,
stories.
real stories. And we would sit in our right next door in our living room. All these 12 or 14 people would come to our home and we would chat about what's working. So the other guy, very similarly, here's what he did. He said, Mera meetha meri kamzori hai, right? I have to have my meetha.
Mm.
And Renu is the same.
Yes.
Renu loves
Me too.
her meetha as a
Me too.
Punjabi girl.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was raised on mithai, and that was a manifestation of love from parents, from others, from other
Yeah.
folks. So this guy, Anshul, who freely talks about it in the film as well, he talks about, and he was quite significantly overweight and lost
Total 18 pounds.
18 or 19, of which he has regained about 7, but he's still going at it, right? So he talks about the fact that the small change he did was, he said, because mithai was my kamzori, but I know I can't stop it completely.
Hmm.
So instead of mithai, I keep a small
Jabardast thing.
sugar-free candy in
Right,
my pocket. So
right.
every time I have a sugar craving, I go for that,
Hmm.
something in front of me. So after a month, and then another girl, Shuchi in the film talks about this very, she said, you know what, the thing that changed my life was, because पहले मैं क्या करती थी, न्यू ईयर रेजोल्यूशन बनाया और बोला,
Hmm.
एक महीने में मुझे लूज करना है, but I have no idea how to actually do it. But she said, now what, based on what she said, if I only have to do one thing, I can manage that.
Mm,
So she did one thing as well. She just began to check her weight every day, right?
mm.
So
So she was conscious.
she was
Yes.
just conscious.
Mm, mm,
And then, so actionable, simple, highly doable step that you can blow out of the ballpark, right? Do it so darn well after a month, and it should be relatively simple. And 90%, there was one person who failed, who just didn't quite make it, and she was sort of apologetic. And we said, that's cool, don't worry about it, just restart again. So everyone in that group, by this simple process, at least made some dent. It wasn't a massive dent in some instances, but they made a dent. And buoyed by that, encouraged by that, just very, very encouraged by that, what they did was they then began to do the next thing and the
So
next thing.
I think the one of the take home point is you find your spot which you want to get rid of. So for some it may be juice, for some it may be exercise, for some it may be meditation. Pick one thing
Yeah.
that I'm going to change this for 10 minutes in my life. So if you're not walking at all, just do 10 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah.
just 15
Or
minutes.
if you're
So if
sitting
you,
down
yeah,
all day, just put
That's
an
it.
stand up,
alarm every half an hour and get up and walk for
get
five
up and walk.
That's
minutes.
it. And
So simple.
literally both
Yeah.
do it and
Yeah.
monitor it
Yeah.
and congratulate yourself at the end of a month to say,
Exactly.
You've done.
Exactly.
I killed this one.
Yeah.
I now need to move to another,
Second.
what is called habit stacking. I want to stack on this habit, another habit that will change my life. So don't get down or in any manner. And if you fail, no worries. At the end of a month, start again.
And we always talk that if you don't have time to watch the documentary, which is 2 hour, 14 minutes, I know it's long, but it is very well done and it
Yeah.
covers a lot of ground. At least listen to the last 45 minutes to change your life.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Now, the thing I also want you to talk about is as a culture sometimes, in our cultures, there's this emotional repression. You're not allowed to say certain things. As a youngster, you're very mindful and respectful, which is amazing. But does this cultural silence also show up in symptomatic physical heart disease, you think?
Absolutely, I think. And I think if I have to say that, I think it is more in women than men
Yes,
overall, because
yes.
as a cultural, we are a male hierarchy society. I mean, it happens here, it happens in UK, it happens in India, no matter where we are. And even much more in the lower
Socioeconomic groups,
socioeconomic
yeah.
household happens even more. So there are a couple of things that happen. That number one, the symptoms are not taken seriously,
Hmm.
because even if a woman is complaining, because it's more women, the symptoms of heart disease are much less than men. So they may manifest more like anxiety,
Hmm.
like headache, like other things, or just an arm pain and not a chest pain. And even though chest pain is the most common symptom, and they're taken, oh, she's just like that. And the other thing is, as women, we are nurturers. So we just want to take care of the whole world, our kids, our husbands, our in-laws, our mother, everybody comes first before us. So we will just not take care of us. And then if a son is having some symptoms, the father will say, oh my gosh, he's just, he's
Yeah.
not trying to do his work. He's just trying to shirk work. He doesn't want to do it. So I think those emotional repression are very real, to the point that one of the guys from Pakistan, Dr. Virani, actually he talks in his talk when we talked about prevention of heart disease. He said one of the biggest thing you can do is regarding women, give education to men and not to women.
Interesting.
Because
Interesting.
men is the one who makes the household decision whether he's going to take that woman to the emergency room for a chest pain or not.
Right.
Because they don't understand.
Right.
So,
Because
and
they
I
don't.
think I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Renu is using that example. I think
Yeah.
even more so. What struck me with that example was Pakistani society compared to Indian society in general is much more conservative,
Hmm.
right? Muslim households, Pakistani households are more conservative. That's a fact. And whether they are, anywhere, Indian households are diverse in their
Hmm.
in their attitudes, right?
Right.
So there can be some, particularly in metros now, or those who've moved abroad, there is a movement toward more equality. There is a
Hmm.
movement toward social equality and so on. But where we come from, there is a highly diverse group of cultural values that are instilled in people. And like Renu said, in that context, we strongly believe, although both men and women can be impacted by repression, in that the word that you used, we feel that in the context of cardiac disease, that is just amplified in women. So which is why we keep coming back to that, because of the social
Because
norms.
they're the ones who speak up less,
Yes.
Absolutely.
and they're the ones who pay less attention to
Yes.
Yeah.
themselves. And as
Yes.
I always say continuously, you can't pour from a pot that's empty.
Yeah.
You have to look up. Even in a plane, they always say, put
Yeah.
your own mask before
Yeah.
helping someone else.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I say that all the time to women, to men, and particularly, like you said, to women.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
want to look after your families, look after yourself first.
And
Yeah.
just one last thing on that, that as a physician,
Mm,
physicians are also very biased. When
right.
it comes to women and heart disease, the physicians don't think that and don't take the symptoms seriously. And
Ah,
we have a very
interesting.
elegant story in the documentary, and I don't want to talk about it, but a physician cardiologist talks about his mother as to how he dismissed her,
Mm,
and she had a stent the next day. And this was a
yeah, yeah.
physician cardiologist, and this was his own mom.
And in New York City of all places.
Yeah, so so you're saying that because over the years they've always thought it's men who get
Yeah.
the heart issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, on that basis, given that we're saying that there is all this heart issues happening, I think in your documentary you said twice as much in South Asians or people from the Indian subcontinent as others. What tests should people be doing before 40 and after 40?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that um, what we like to talk about, I will mention the one most important, but we talk about in the film, we talk about a little bit of the human body being quite complex and similar to an aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
So if you try to fly an aircraft with no dials, that's how we run our bodies. We are not looking at anything, but it's important to look at some critical dials. And we mentioned a list of things relatively simple. All of them are relatively simple. But if you were to ask me the one thing that I would want to get in someone who's less than 40, right? In addition to knowing yourself
Your body.
overall, the one thing I would say is know your LDL cholesterol, literally like the back of your hand. You should know that number, and you should know that as a South Asian, you need to keep that number less than 70. Less than 100 for sure, and ideally less than 70. Lower, the better. So the single most important thing you can do for yourself is people will, when I ask them, even highly educated people, we were at a get together 2 days ago,
Yesterday.
yesterday, and we asked, well, so he goes, I watched your documentary and da 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 da, and we said, do you know your cholesterol? He goes, yeah, my total cholesterol is 220. That sounded high to me, so I said, do you know your LDL? And he was scratching his head. Highly educated person who was in an IT
He's a
company.
PhD scientist.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
so
Yeah.
so the point is he did not know his LDL. So it's the single most, and Renu's entire story revolves around that. So LDL to me is the most important, less than 40. In someone who's right around 40 or beyond, and there's nothing magical about this, we're talking in broad strokes. Someone who's 40 or older, a very critical test I've found is what's called the coronary artery calcium, the CAC score, right?
Okay.
So the
Okay.
CAC score is, many people don't know about it, but it's a fascinating test that very quickly, based on a simple score, it tells you how much calcium is in the arteries and can be, if it's negative, it's very reassuring. And if it's positive, it kind of drives you for action much more
Earlier.
actively and early compared to anything. In Renu's case, that was another example. My case, big example. When you know you're looking at a score that's high, you're saying to yourself every morning, wait a minute, something's brewing here. I need
Mm-hmm.
to do something about it. So those are the two biggies that I think people currently don't do, not to mention
Now
all
the
the other
simple
stuff.
things you can, simple things, which is again your body, learning your body is your weight, your height, your waist circumference. Because in Indians, the BMI
Mm-hmm.
could be fooling us, and the waist circumference should be less than 80 in women, less than 90 in men, or less than 85. But these simple things, a blood sugar test once a year, it
Mm-hmm.
even if you're young, because diabetes is starting 10 years early in India. And if you don't know, 2050, India will be the diabetes capital of the world. And even in Masala study in US, where they found the regular percentage of diabetes being 11%, the South Asians can be an upward of 20%. In UK, it is close to 15 to 16%. So it's much higher than any other Caucasian population.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. You said the CAT score for over 40 and LDL for under 40.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other tests you would recommend?
Yeah. So I, like Renu said, some simple things, right? So if you look at, we have this lovely, which we've actually posted on our website as well, www.thebrownheart.com. There is a nice little dial that kind of goes into your question. It's a one simple thing. You glance at it, you know exactly what you need to do. So that includes some simple things like Renu said, blood pressure. You need to know your blood pressure. You need to know your blood sugar. Like Renu said, your BMI and your waist circumference. Those are the four. They're not tests. They're simple things you
That's
can
it.
do.
Okay, okay. Right.
But
Thank
I
you.
would not recommend, Anshu, I'm not one to recommend a zillion tests. You know,
Right,
it's
right.
simple things.
You're saying these are enough.
These
Yes,
are
these
more
are
than enough.
enough.
More than enough.
Okay. I'm taking medication at 35. So do you want to, statins at 35?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
someone had asked you to talk about that some
Yes.
more.
Yeah, happy to do that. So um, for some of your listeners, there is a fascinating book. I'm just going to parenthetically make a note of it. It's called Outlive. You may have read it, Anshu. I don't know if not, it's worthy. It's an outstanding book, and the beauty of
Yes.
the book is you can use it like a reference guide. You can only look at the cardiac section or the cancer
Hmm.
section or whatever. It's written by a physician, and in broad brushes, the concept is that the earlier you start, the modern medicine is so good at treating things but not starting early preventive measures. And he talks about, and several of our interviewees talked about starting literally in the mother's womb, and
Wow.
then in children, to prevent childhood obesity and so on. So starting early. Now, the question
Statin.
about statins is, there is so much that circulates in WhatsApp groups
Hmm.
from people who have no idea what they're talking about these conspiracy theories, about how people are trying to make money off of this. There are these big companies in it. There are all of this. So, and statins can hurt you. They can do this, that, and the other. The fact of the matter is statins, and by the way, we have no stock in any statins or anything. We have no conflict of interest whatsoever. I don't care whatever about any of the companies out there, and we never have, by the way. We've never had a conflict of interest. So I will mention this, that statins, in my opinion, this is where the issue of natural versus not natural comes in, right? In the context of natural, it's important to state that when we talk about natural, there are many things that are wonderful that we've already talked about. Some things are not. So when
Hmm.
you begin saying, I take X or Y, that's natural, let's say a medication, let's say
Hmm.
something available over the counter. Remember, in our country, in the United States, and I'm sure there are similar regulatory things in the UK, the Federal Drug Administration, the FDA, does not regulate those. You have no idea how much material it contains. You have no idea what it contains sometimes. There are about 50 things in it together. So you can't even tell. I've had patients come in with getting severe side effects from them and so on. On the other hand, in medications, particularly those that have been there for 30, 40, 50 years, like the statins, you know inside and out what is in there, how much is there, and based on millions and millions of people and data, you know what it does to your body, good, bad, and ugly, right? So, in our opinion, statins have been studied to the ground, and their side effect profile is remarkably good. I can argue with anyone on
And the
this.
other thing is that we actually talk in the documentary about the study, which compared 7 natural things, including garlic, turmeric, you name it,
Hmm.
red yeast rice. All of that were compared to a low dose of rosuvastatin, which is 5 milligram, very low dose. And what they showed was all 7 of them have very minimal or no effect on LDL, while just the little dose of rosuvastatin was very effective in
Oh,
lowering your
wow.
LDL. And I will tell you my story with the LDL of 70 all my life, which was wonderful. As soon as I went through menopause, my LDL
Hmm.
started to go up. And it went to 80, it went to 90, it went to 100, 120, 120. And then my doctor kept saying, Renu, your cholesterol is rising due to menopause. You cannot change your diet more. So let's start statin. And I said, no, I'm not starting statin. I'm healthy. And it went to 140, and that's when okay, I'm doing your CAC score.
Yeah.
If you have something, you're starting statin. And it was little too late. I already had heart disease. I had chest pain in a month. The horse was out of the barn.
Wow.
So
So,
it is
Okay.
a real story, and I hope that people can take from my story. So now I take 5 medications every night, which I hate, but I have to, no choice. I would have just saved my life by taking one medicine at age 40 when I needed to.
so I think that's the most
Interesting.
powerful thing, Anshu.
Mm.
We tell people that statins have been tested for decades. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be on a statin, and if you are a strong proponent of starting natural, please do. Nothing wrong with that. Start with that. Start with diet. Start with everything that you
But
need to start.
watch the
After,
score, watch the
yeah,
LDL is what you're
yes,
saying.
and
Yeah.
no more than 6 months. If at 6 months, no more delaying, start medication. It'll lower your LDL. It'll improve your life.
Do you have any last bits of advice that you think, okay, guys, go home and do this?
Yeah, I would just say one thing: know yourself, know your numbers, know yourself. And secondly, that when you are looking for information, of course, watch the Brown Heart,
Yes, yes.
www.thebrownheart.com, because it's a, as you said in the beginning, it's a one source of information. It's on the website, freely available. We are planning to keep it free like always. And also we are going to, the website is rich with information related to cardiac issues and prevention and so on. So to me, the single most important thing is you know about everything else in the world, know about yourself.
And I would ask, because being a woman and suffering this heart disease, my message is not to them, not that I don't care about men, but my message is more to women, because we don't take care of ourselves. So two things: if you're an older woman, of course you have to take care of yourself, like this, like me and Anshu. We are in our 50s, we need to take care of ourselves. But if you have a younger daughter-in-law, or if you're young in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, one of the things which is very important is this: prevention starts with pregnancy. So as soon as you're pregnant, if you have gestational diabetes or high blood pressure, not only your child is going to suffer, but you will suffer from heart disease. So make sure that you don't get gestational diabetes. Make sure you control your weight at age 25 or age 20. Make sure when you have children, you start them early in exercise at age 2. At
Mm-hmm.
age 2, because we are born with thin muscles and we stay with thin muscles all our life. So there's so much more to it than prevention, starting early, early, and early. That's all I would say.
Yes, and the thing that I will add to that, like you both had said, just know yourself. Just be very careful that you know your scores. You might feel totally healthy and feel, why do I need a blood test? But yes, you do. You know, it's
And I
good
will
to
just
just
end with
know.
one small story. We just did another live. It was a WhatsApp live from some other person who has approached us, like you, after watching our documentary. And then, so he did live and he said, Renu, you will not believe this. I was just talking to him and he said, you will not believe this. We had, 500 people live on that day. Two of them decided to watch the documentary and do their CAC score. And they were in their 40s. Both of them had severe heart disease, to the point
Wow.
they ended up getting, one of them got bypass surgery, one of them got
Wow.
stent. One of them got stent and one of them got bypass surgery. And I said, my job is done. My job is done.
Wow.
Mm.
That was
Yeah.
amazing. That was amazing. So you're already beginning to save lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Amazing.
we are just, it's so heartwarming. I mean, and that itself, our job is done. One saved life,
One day, like,
job done.
you feel like the
You feel
whole,
like you've done your
all the
job.
work was worth it. Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Anshu, for having us. And
This
you're
was
very
amazing.
kind. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Nirmal, and thank
Thank
you,
you.
Renu. It was a
Thanks a lot.
wonderful
Thanks a
chat.
lot for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for being here on the chat
Bye.
today.